Hello everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to get to know Aleister Crowley better, the man who styled himself the Beast 666, who was accused of Satanism, bizarre practices, sexual rituals, and black magic, and who left behind a religion, an ideology, and a long trail of scandals. He was called the most depraved man of his century, and also one of the most influential occult thinkers of the modern world. This isn't a black and white portrait. We're going to look at who he really was. A child raised inside a fanatical religious environment, a young man who defied every rule, a magician who wanted to reinvent reality, and an old man who died sick and largely forgotten. Aleister Crowley was born on the 12th of October 1875 into a well-off family in Leamington Spa, Warwickshire, England. His birth name was Edward Alexander Crowley. The family belonged to the upper middle class of the time, lived comfortably from a family brewing business, and his parents, Edward and Emily Crowley, were devout members of a strict evangelical group known as the Plymouth Brethren. This movement was known for rigid discipline, a literal reading of the Bible, and the rejection of almost any form of entertainment, art, or worldly pleasure. In their home, there were no toys, no secular books, no joking. A child was expected to pray, read scripture, keep his head down, and learn that the world was corrupt, the body was sinful, and the only salvation came through fear and obedience. His father, Edward Crowley, had left business life and became an itinerant preacher within that religious community. He traveled from town to town, delivering public sermons about hell, sin, and redemption. At home, he was an authoritative figure, consistent in his beliefs. He wasn't violent, but he maintained a constant atmosphere of religious tension. His mother, Emily, was harsher still. Nothing slipped past her. No question, no emotion, no deviation was tolerated. She wasn't warm. She was cold, strict, convinced that a child must be kept in fear of God. When Edward Alexander did something that didn't match her religious vision, she would contemptuously call him the Beast. That was the first time the word that would later define him was thrown in his face. From early on, Crowley stood out for an unusual intelligence. He had a strong memory, a rich imagination, and a curiosity that didn't fit the rigidity of the world he lived in. He asked questions. He didn't accept religious formulas without dissecting them. He felt constrained, suffocated by everything imposed on him, but he still had no way out. His education was intensely religious. Every day he learned scripture, was forced to memorize entire passages from the Bible, attend prayers, avoid anything labeled worldly. He wasn't allowed to read novels, listen to music, talk about sexuality, express his desires, or speak openly about his dream. That early repression didn't extinguish his mind. It compressed it into a hidden corner where it began to warp under pressure. Beneath the imposed silence, a mechanism of revolt was already forming. It wouldn't explode immediately, but it worked deep down with a growing tension. Even as a child, Crowley was marked as different, not because he behaved badly, but because he saw behind the mask. He sensed that what he was being preached wasn't the whole truth. He saw adults contradict what they claimed to be. He noticed hypocrisy, even before he had the language to denounce it. For the moment, he listened. He watched. He recorded. Until everything finally broke. His father, Edward Crowley, was the only figure in the family for whom young Edward felt a genuine form of respect. Though rigid and deeply religious, he had a certain coherence, a calm discipline, a presence the child experienced as stable. They went on walks together, read the Bible together, and for a while, Edward tried sincerely to believe what his father preached. That bond snapped in 1887 when his father was diagnosed with cancer of the tongue and died shortly afterward. Edward was 11. Death brought not only grief, but a question that remained like an unhealed crack. Why did God take the only man he loved? No answer came. What came instead was rage, a quiet, dense rage that spread in every direction. Against religion, against his mother, against morality, against the very idea of God. His mother became even more severe. She began to control him more harshly, restrict every freedom, punish him for questions, for gestures, for breathing. She called him the Beast, more and more, and the child stopped trying to deny it. He began to accept the word. After his father's death, he was sent to King's College School in London, and then to several boarding schools. In all of them, he felt like an outsider. He rejected rules, resisted authority, mocked teachers, read forbidden books in secret. He despised the other children for their conformism, and he began to convince himself that he was different, not only intellectually, but spiritually. In his adolescent journal, the first signs already appear of a worldview completely opposed to the religion that raised him. He writes about individual will as power, about sexuality as liberation, about magic and control over reality. He is fascinated by numbers, symbols, ancient writings. He builds an alternative identity, one in which religion has no authority. In his mind, God becomes an idea that can be defied, replaced, or destroyed. He no longer seeks salvation. He wants to understand how the universe works without intermediaries. After years of religious schooling in boarding houses, Edward Alexander Crowley reaches Trinity College, Cambridge. He is 20, with a considerable inheritance left by his father. No one controls him anymore, and he answers to no one. In that academic environment, he begins to read everything he can find about the history of religion, alchemy, astrology, symbols, mysticism, and Eastern philosophies. He spends hours in libraries, hunting for hidden ideas in rare books. He is drawn to any author who has been ignored, censored, or labeled dangerous. Alongside study, he lives intensely. He begins to travel, write poetry with erotic themes, explore sexuality in all its forms. He lives without restrictions, without rules. He records everything in journals, encounters, sensations, visions, ideas. He sees the body and pleasure as instruments through which the invisible forces of life can be discovered. In that period, the first ritual experiments begin. He tries methods of concentration, invocatory formulas from old texts, exercises of will, controlled abstinence, periods of isolation. He wants to test his limits and access another state of consciousness. In those years, he also travels to the Alps, climbs demanding mountains, and lives through a stretch of exertion, silence, and reflection. There, for the first time, he feels there is an invisible layer between himself and reality, a layer that can be penetrated. He looks for a way to reach it not through prayer, but through direct knowledge. After finishing his studies, he decides he doesn't want an ordinary career. He doesn't want titles or positions. He devotes himself entirely to the idea of occult research. He studies old texts about summoning spirits, communicating with unknown forces, and the role of will in transforming reality. In 1898, he learns of an active esoteric order in England. He contacts a member and is accepted almost immediately. At his first initiation, he chooses a symbolic name. He assumes a new identity that expresses his determination to go all the way on the chosen path without abandoning a single step. From that moment, he begins daily practice of complex rituals, records, results, creates his own system of signs, gestures, formulas, and symbols. He separates himself from the world around him. He lives for a single direction, the knowledge of invisible forces and their mastery through pure will. The beginning of the path had been taken, and the path had no way back. After he was accepted into the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, Crowley threw himself into it with an intensity few others matched. He studied the internal text for hours, memorized ritual formulas precisely, copied secret manuals, and performed daily exercises of concentration, invocation, and visualization. He believed he was ready for advanced grades, regardless of his age or experience. Very quickly, tensions surfaced. Older members did not trust him. He carried a defiant attitude, spoke his mind without restraint, and seemed to be after something other than inner peace. He did not respect hierarchies. He believed authority came from force, not from titles. In London, rumors spread about his eccentric behavior. People said he performed rituals in special garments, lit colored candles at midnight, and sat in meditation for hours without blinking. Some suspected he exaggerated deliberately to attract attention or intimidate. William Butler Yeats, the famous poet and an influential member of the order, considered him dangerous, a destabilizing man, using magic to feed his ego. The head of the order, Samuel Mathers, had initially supported Crowley. He recognized his knowledge and willpower, but over time became more reserved. Crowley pushed for advanced initiations that others refused. The conflict peaked when Crowley received permission from Mathers to advance without the agreement of the London leadership. They refused to acknowledge his grade. Then Crowley climbed the steps of the London temple dressed in a ceremonial robe, his face covered, and tried to enter the ritual hall as an act of open defiance. He was stopped at the door. In that moment, the bond with the Golden Dawn shattered. Crowley decided he had nothing left to learn from them. He withdrew to Scotland, to an isolated place on the shore of Loch Ness. There he bought an old house called Boleskine, simple in architecture, placed in deep quiet. It was the place where he intended to perform a ritual he had read about in manuscripts attributed to Abramelin, a method of contacting the inner being seen as one's personal spiritual guide. The ritual required months of preparation, sexual abstinence, controlled diet, silence, and isolation. Crowley began the process, but during the working, he abandoned it. He stopped abruptly and left to travel. He left the ritual unfinished, leaving open an invisible process he would later speak about. Neighbors reported changes in the atmosphere. They said animals behaved strangely. Odd sounds were heard at night. Something seemed to hang in the air. The house stayed associated with him long after he left. In that period, Crowley writes, experiments, defines his methods. He no longer follows what he learned in the order. He builds his own system based on what he observes, feels, and believes he can control. He argues that every person has a unique will, a direction to follow, and that truth is not moral, it is functional. This is the stage when a new vision begins to take shape, one that will lead very soon to the emergence of a doctrine of his own. After the Scottish isolation, Crowley begins to travel. Mexico, then India, Ceylon, China, Egypt. These journeys aren't tourism. They are searches. He searches for rituals, teachers, and systems of knowledge that hadn't passed through Europe's filter. In India, he approaches yogic practice. He stays in ashrams, learns controlled breathing, meditation, the mastery of desire. He tries to reach states of silence through methods different from what the West knew. He writes everything down, compares everything, combines everything.
In Egypt, something happens that changes everything. He is accompanied by his wife, Rose. One day, Rose enters a strange state and says an entity is trying to communicate. Crowley, skeptical at first, agrees to follow her indications. They are led, symbolically, to a statue of Horus, the falcon-headed god, protector of vision and will. In the following days, Crowley claims that a voice dictated a text to him. He withdraws to a hotel room, sits at a table, and writes down everything he hears. The text is written over 3 consecutive days, at the same hour each day. At the end, he has a manuscript that will become the foundation of a new religion. The text is called the Book of the Law. It does not arrive with commandments. It does not demand obedience. It does not promise salvation. It says something else. Every person has a path of their own, and their task is to discover it and follow it with their whole will. The central idea is stated plainly. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Crowley insists he did not invent those ideas. He says they were dictated by a being named Aiwas. He doesn't describe it in detail. He doesn't say where it comes from, only that it speaks in the name of another order, one that does not belong to this plane. The texts from that period are not mere declarations. They are entire structures of symbols, formulas, laws of will, descriptions of the inner universe. He uses numbers, letters, images. He introduces gods from Egyptian mythology, but gives them new functions. Nui is identified with all that surrounds us, with the boundless space, the stars, the sky, the cosmic feminine principle, the limitless source. Hadit is the point of consciousness, the spark in each being. It has no form, no fixed position, pure awareness in an active state. Rahur is the active force, the impulse to create, to act without fear. In his vision, the person who discovers their true will becomes a free force that no longer needs authority, religion, or dogma. He doesn't preach chaos, but he also doesn't set comforting boundaries. The book is not greeted enthusiastically by anyone around him. Friends, colleagues, acquaintances in the occult world distance themselves. Some say he has gone mad. Others believe he is inventing it all. Crowley, however, is convinced he has received a mission. He no longer wants to study other people's systems. Now he wants to build a new one in which the human being does not submit but creates. In that moment, the religion that would mark the rest of his life is born. Thelema. After receiving the Book of the Law, Crowley builds a religious system around the 3 dictated texts. He calls it Thelema, a Greek word meaning will. The entire religion rests on the idea that every being has a unique, precise will, impossible to replace. This will is not about passing wants, preferences, or impulses. It is an inner direction that rises from a deep core. Followers of Thelema were taught to discover that direction through ritual, reflection, writing, isolation, and direct experience. The sacred texts do not give commandments, but they contain sharp statements, saturated with symbolism. One of the most important is, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." No explanations are offered. The person is left to search. Another key line appears as well. Love is the law, love under will. The religion has 3 central figures, each representing a force in the universe. Nuit is everything that contains. The vast space, the stretch of the sky, the stars, the limitless cosmic feminine principle. Hadit is the spark inside every being, formless, unlocated, representing consciousness in motion. Rahurquit is the force of manifestation, action, impact, will breaking through obstacles. Thelema proposes a complete shift in how spirituality is understood. There is no concept of sin. There is no idea of forgiveness. There is no prayer toward an external authority. Everything happens inside the individual. Crowley builds precise rituals. Some are daily. Practitioners are meant to rise at dawn, cleanse the space, recite a fixed formula toward the 4 cardinal directions, make symbolic hand gestures, light a candle, record their thoughts. There are exercises for tracking thoughts. Every idea is to be written down, analyzed, observed in its movement. Practitioners learn to control the body, hold physical postures for long periods, breathe in set rhythms, record dreams and visions. Sexuality has an essential role in Crowley's system. The sexual act is treated as a ritual in itself. The energy generated during it can be concentrated toward a specific aim. Visualization, breath, and ritual positioning are used. Everything is recorded, measured, documented. In important workings, partners are expected to be in a state of maximum focus, with a clearly defined objective. There is no room for wasted energy. Crowley argues that sexual energy is among the most powerful forces in the universe and can be used to alter subtle reality. The sacred texts include cryptic fragments, numbers, riddles, repetitions, inverted letters. Meaning reveals itself only to those who undergo a personal process of decoding. It is not a religion that can be taught as a simple handbook. It is an individual path built on direct practice. Thelema also proposes a new view of the relationship with others. Each person is meant to follow their will without interfering with another person's will. Conflict appears when someone abandons their path. The ideal is not submission. The ideal is assumption of responsibility. Crowley does not hand out answers. He teaches people to ask the right questions. He does not impose one set of rules for all. He offers an instrument. Only those who dare use it. In his later writings, he develops an entire system of correspondences, numbers, letters, gods, colors, sounds, hours, astronomical positions, all linked to will and manifestation. He does not impose them. He makes them available. For Crowley, Thelema was more than a system. It was the answer he built with his own hands. After publishing his texts, shaping his religious system and gathering a small circle of followers. Crowley decides to create an isolated space where thelema can be applied directly. He chooses a place in Sicily, in a town called Cefalù. In 1920, he moves there with a few disciples and rents a simple building, transforming it into what he calls the Abbey of Thelema. The building is old, modest, but its isolation and the surrounding nature make it suitable for spiritual experiments and the rituals to come. There is no external authority there. Crowley is central. The followers live communally, eat together, rise early, keep journals, perform rituals, record dreams, and follow his instructions. The walls are painted with symbols, spirals, eyes, gods, sexual figures, numbers, sacred words. Everything is meant to influence the subconscious. The space is not decorated, it is programmed. Each day has its structure. Morning begins with physical exercises, then invocations, readings from the Book of the Law, periods of silence, automatic writing, or rituals aimed at confronting fear. At night, special forms of erotic ritual are practiced, depending on lunar cycles, the participant's condition, and the established goal. Morality is not discussed. Efficiency is discussed. Every emotion is turned into fuel for will. Suffering, fear, jealousy, euphoria, all are observed, analyzed, included in the process. Among those who stayed there was Raoul Loveday, a young Englishman who arrived with his wife, Leah Hersig. Loveday was fascinated by Crowley and participated actively. Shortly after settling in the abbey, he falls seriously ill and dies. The exact cause of death is not clearly established. Some say he drank contaminated water. Others speak of rituals that exhausted him physically. His wife, outraged, returns to England and makes public what she claims happened there. The press erupts. British newspapers call Crowley the Mad Wizard of Sicily, the most dangerous man in the world, the beast that brings death. They write about blood sexual rituals, substance use, orgies, children present in the house, symbolic sacrifices. Mussolini, then leading Italy, declares him undesirable and expels him. The abbey is closed. The walls are painted over. Everything that happened there remains wrapped in rumor, contradiction, and unease. Years later, artists, musicians, and researchers will go to Cefalù and try to reconstruct what really happened. Many paintings will be discovered under layers of lime wash. Many manuscripts written in that period will circulate in restricted circles. For Crowley, that place had been a spiritual laboratory. For the rest of the world, it had been a threat. After the expulsion, he has no stable center. He spends the rest of his life moving between London, Paris, Berlin, and other cities, living on donations, writing, and the support of a few loyal followers. His health deteriorates. He had used drugs for a long time. At first, for ritual exploration, then to dull pain. Later, as dependency. He became addicted to heroin. At times he tried to stop, but he returned again and again. He also used cocaine, ether, hashish, mescaline. He did not hide it. He wrote about it. He described them as instruments. In his journals, he recorded dosages, effects, the states they produced. He believed they could function as doors to another perception, as long as they were controlled. Control, however, became harder and harder. He keeps writing. He publishes articles, books of magic, poetry, religious commentary. Much of it is difficult. Codes, symbols, concealed language. Some texts make sense only to those who know his system. The press portrays him as filthy, scandalous, sexual rituals, strange relationships, obscene writings, the influence of young people. He is thrown out of hotels, out of social circles, even out of some occult societies. He has multiple partners. Some are treated as pillar women, strong women who join rituals and support his experiments. Many become psychologically exhausted. Some suffer nervous breakdowns. Others end up hospitalized. There are entire journals in which they describe what they lived. Extreme exercises, daily rituals, enforced silence, ritual sex, automatic writing, substance use. Not all were victims. Some remained. Others left abruptly, shattered. Crowley expresses no regret. He claims every person has the power to choose. If someone chooses to enter his system, they accept its consequences. By the end, he is followed by a small number of people. For them, he is a master. For most of the world, a threat. He began as an intelligent student. He became a symbol. Then a sick man isolated, mocked, forgotten by the majority. Yet for those reading him in silence, his influence had not faded. Aleister Crowley wrote a great deal. He left behind treatises on magic, poetry, journals, sacred texts, rituals, philosophical commentary, and personal notes. His books influenced generations of practitioners, even when hard to find and hard to understand. One of his most important works is Magic, Book 4. There he lays out, step by step, his view of what magic is and how it can be practiced. The teachings are structured in 4 parts: theory, practice, symbolism, and the method of initiation. He writes about the importance of will, concentration exercises, silence, purification, and how precise actions can influence subtle reality. He includes daily rituals, describes body postures, recommends inner quiet, and the observation of thoughts. Every detail has a function. Another central work is the Book of Lies. It contains short, numbered texts in which keys are hidden. Each fragment expresses a state, an observation, a rupture in ordinary thinking. It offers no explanations. It leaves the reader to search for connections. Among them are hints about the structure of the being, the functioning of the mind, the nature of reality, and how to step out of illusion. The Book of the Law, the text dictated by Awas in Egypt, is considered the foundational scripture of Thelema. It contains direct statements, sacred utterances, and affirmations about will, freedom, love, identity, and action. It speaks about the beginning of a new era and the role of each being in a cosmic process. It is not a book of rules. It is a declaration of force. He also wrote The Equinox, where he discusses symbols, the balance between opposites, and inner work in relation to the outer world. In The Vision and the Voice, he documents a series of profound experiences in the desert through contact with spheres called ethers. The book describes states of consciousness, entities, subtle structures, and processes of initiation that follow no familiar tradition. Magic in Theory and Practice is another major work, where he describes rituals, magical formulas, methods of preparation, types of invocation, the role of symbols, kinds of magic, and the link between those practices and human will. He writes about the speaking of names, the power of vibration, sacred space, the function of each element inside a magical act. In Liber 777, he offers detailed tables of correspondences, numbers, colors, sounds, entities, planetary attributes, zodiacal signs, and other elements used in ritual construction. It is technical, used to build precise magical formulas. Crowley also published poetry, some erotic, some mystical, as well as commentaries on ancient texts, philosophical fragments, notes about dreams, reports of experiences with sacred plants and drugs, and correspondence with disciples. Each book has its own structure, its own language, its own key. Some can be read directly, others require months or years of study. His writings were not made for the general public. They were aimed at those who seek knowledge through practice, not belief. He stated clearly that any system is only an instrument and that the person using it must have the power to understand it, test it, and, when necessary, leave it behind. Throughout his life, Crowley was accused of Satanism. The press called him the Beast 666. He was described as possessed, dangerous, linked to dark forces. The question remains, was he truly a Satanist? In his own writings, Crowley repeatedly says he does not believe in Satan as an independent entity in the Christian sense. He treats the figure of Satan as a symbolic projection of the rebel, the one who breaks the chains of dogma. He does not uphold the existence of hell or an absolute evil force. He embraced the title, the Beast 666, not as a symbol of the Christian devil, but as an act of defiance toward the church and toward the religion he was raised in. He said his mother called him the Beast as a child, and that he chose to turn the insult into a name of power. He used symbols many people considered satanic. He wrote with aggressive, blasphemous language. He emphasized sexual liberation, the destruction of dogma, and the rejection of imposed morality. He promoted rituals involving taboo elements, blood, nudity, invocations. He wrote about Lucifer. He referenced entities from traditions labeled demonic. He integrated such figures into rituals and formulas, not as gods to worship, but as forces within the self that can be activated, mastered, or understood. In some texts, the name Baphomet appears, a figure often used in ceremonial magic. He signed with that name while leading a branch of the Ordo Templi Orientis. For him, Baphomet is not presented as an evil deity, but as a symbol of equilibrium between masculine and feminine, light and shadow. He was drawn to what was forbidden. He approached practices considered dark. He wrote about symbolic sacrifice. He described rituals involving blood, bodily fluids, and objects charged with occult meaning. He argued there is no absolute good or evil, only forces, and the way they are used. He also mocked modern Satanism in places, saying many who call themselves Satanists don't understand what they are invoking, that they use symbols without knowing what they mean. At the same time, he was fully aware of the image he projected. He knew that embracing the beast image drew attention, produced fear, and stayed in memory. He did it on purpose. Some researchers see him as an occult philosopher, obsessed with symbolic systems. Others see a manipulator, hungry for power and control. Some follow his teachings without calling him a Satanist. Others believe he opened doors that should not have been opened. In the end, Crowley did not preach the worship of the devil. He did not call people to bow to a malevolent force. He used every symbol that triggers fear, revolt, and disgust, and put them in front of the world without softening them, without protective framing. He lived deliberately at the edge of every definition. Every interpretation he provoked was allowed to spread without him clarifying it. He chose not to deny. He chose to let the world draw its own conclusions. Although he was isolated, criticized, and rejected during his life, Aleister Crowley's influence grew after his death. His writings circulated through occult circles, initiatory groups, artists, musicians, and alternative spiritual movements. In the 1960s and 1970s, with the rise of counterculture, his name resurfaces. Young people interested in esotericism, transpersonal psychology, and spiritual freedom begin to read him. In that context, he is rediscovered as a symbol of rebellion against the system and of inner exploration. One of the most visible impacts is in music. The Beatles included him on the cover of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Jimmy Page, guitarist of Led Zeppelin, bought Boleskine House and collected Crowley's manuscripts. David Bowie referenced him in lyrics. Ozzy Osbourne released the song Mr. Crowley. His texts influenced modern forms of Wicca, especially streams that emphasize personal will and ritual practice. Thelema is different from Wicca, but some ideas were absorbed and adapted. Several contemporary occult orders, including branches derived from the Ordo Templi Orientis, Use systems created by Crowley. His rituals are taught. The Book of the Law is studied. Methods of invocation, purification, and concentration from Book 4 are practiced. He has been studied by scholars of religious history, anthropologists, and psychologists interested in the limits of consciousness. Some compare him to mystical figures from other cultures, not to elevate him, but to understand his inner trajectory. In visual art, Crowleyan symbols appear in paintings, films, installations, and performance pieces. His image has been reinvented in countless ways, sometimes as a guru, sometimes as a monster. Online, on occult forums, his texts are translated, debated, practiced. His system is seen as complete, but hard to penetrate. Those who follow it are called Thelemites. Some practice quietly, others teach openly. His influence has entered pop culture. References to his name, the number 666, Baphomet, or phrases from the Book of the Law appear in series, video games, novels, films, and even advertising, most often used superficially, without direct knowledge. Crowley did not build a powerful institution. He did not leave an easy inheritance. Yet his ideas seeped deeply into society, especially wherever there is a hunger for meaning beyond official religion. For some, he is a symbol of spiritual liberation. For others, a dangerous influence. Either way, his trace did not disappear. After the abbey at Cefalù was shut down and he was expelled from Italy, Crowley never again had a stable base. He moved between France, Germany, and England. He lived modestly, without secure income. He kept writing, corresponding with followers, and leading rituals in small circles. His health declined steadily. He was addicted to heroin and did not hide it. He treated addiction as a phenomenon to observe, not as sin. He tried more than once to stop, and returned again and again. During that period, he published his last texts. He also wrote a fragmented autobiography. He tried to leave a clearer structure for the order he guided. A few disciples helped him with money and logistics. In 1947, he withdrew to Hastings, a coastal town in England. He lived in a small room with a few personal objects, books, and journals. He was 72. On the 1st of December 1947, Aleister Crowley died quietly in the presence of a small group of close companions. The official cause was heart failure with complications from chronic bronchitis. The funeral was brief. Passages from the Book of the Law were read. The British press wrote about him again, calling him the filthy wizard, the madman of Sicily, and the last great occultist of Europe. His death did not end the story. In the decades that followed, his texts were rediscovered. The order he left behind was revived by younger followers. His books were reissued. The number of readers grew. In alternative culture, he became a symbol. He appeared in music, art, film, literature. He was treated as a master, a pioneer, a warning. Some followed his system entirely. Others took fragments. Some quoted him for shock value. Others studied him in depth. In the end, he achieved what he wanted. He remained. He left deep marks. He was not erased. He lived intensely. He died lucid. And the world still searches for him. He left only his words, scattered across texts, journals, rituals, abrupt phrases, sharp verses, sometimes cryptic, sometimes brutal. He wrote, "Every man and every woman is a star. Love is the law. Love under will. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." But he also wrote, "I am uplifted on a pedestal of stone, and shall pour venom over the world. Accursed be ye, who have understood not. Blood sacrifice is the highest and most true ritual." Magic in Theory and Practice, Chapter 100. He described the ideal man like this: "The chosen man knows no pity. He loves only the strong. The weak must be destroyed." He wrote about destruction. "Break down your laws, break down your teachings, trample down the righteous." He said that God is within man. You are God. Be proud of that. He also said, I want to bring war, to destroy, to cleanse the earth of stupidity. The Book of the Law, as a statement attributed in his circle and echoed in his later tone. He never explained these texts. He never retracted them. He never softened them. He left them as they were. Whoever understands, understands. Whoever doesn't, rejects. In his personal journals, he wrote, I did not come to bring peace. I came to awaken. You can learn from light. You can learn even more from flames. I will draw them all in. Some will burn. Others will be reborn. Aleister Crowley was not easy to understand then or now. He lived driven by a force he called will. He wrote, invoked, defied. He did not want to be a model. He wanted to be real. And his reality was not clean, linear, or comfortable.
He left powerful rituals and deep texts, but also shadows hard to separate from chaos. He was a self-taught genius, and also a man who destroyed many things around him. He searched for truth through pain, ecstasy, abandonment, obsession, and power. He experimented with everything that had been denied to him in childhood. He built a complete system, but he didn't offer it to everyone. He provoked. He demanded that those who follow him pass through fire. He did not offer comfort, he offered a blade. Some see him as a pathbreaker. Others see him as a warning. Maybe the truth sits between. Maybe the man who called himself the Beast, 666, was neither angel nor demon, only someone who refused to hide in front of the world and in front of his own shadows. He destroyed the weak, he shook the strong, he left no one indifferent. And perhaps most important, any teaching must be held up to careful scrutiny. Not everything ancient is profound. Not everything forbidden is valuable. Not everything that looks like illumination comes from light. Listen, read, feel, and ask yourself, what do you feel beyond the words? What moves inside you? What do you think about Aleister Crowley? Did you sense something beyond what he said? Did it stir something in you? Did it give you answers? Or did it raise more questions? Write it in the comments, without fear. There's no judging here. There's thinking here. Hit like if it helped. Share it if you know someone who needs to see this. Subscribe if you want to stay close, and if you want to support the work, join the membership community. Things aren't done halfway here. Until next time, stay awake, stay free, and don't accept anything as truth until you feel it.